in the microcosmic spaces that are our institutions, such as schools and houses of worship. So, in this respect, my talk today is most ardently concerned with the issue of centralized privilege in our academic spaces or our worship spaces. Now, I want to think through this concept of centralized privilege in connection to two particular iterations of it: rights to space and the very privileged assertion of comfort in said spaces. But let's start with the more macro concept of rights to space with the example of manspreading. Has anyone in this space heard of this term? Yeah. It caught on in a big way in New York City a few years ago, I think mostly because of its manifold assertions and examples that could be gleaned on public transportation, as you see here, particularly subway trains. As a rhetorician, terms like manspreading are very exciting to me because it demonstrates the power of language to name and form a feminist critique of a very invasive assertion of power in all the forms it may take. This example is the version that asserts a claim to space through the use of the body, but other forms include claiming space through sound, energy, even overly long email. The point is that this privileged claim to space is not specific to gender as much as it is specific to privilege. And we can get real deep and historic with how these practices of space claiming by rights of power are very much the norm in this society, starting with something like the doctrine of discovery and contemporarily asserted with what the No Doppel movement was fighting. As we think together about how claims to space is a practice of privilege, we should link it back to my opening narrative concerning the academic or the religious institutional space and the ways in which space gets marked and claimed akin to an occupation of space. Within this spatial occupation, diversity as a term and a concept takes on the form of hospitality. Okay, or the lack thereof, as evidenced by my opening narrative, in such a way that a translingual, transcultural woman of color such as myself is viewed as a visitor or a guest who is to be, yes, accommodated in the house of monolingual English-only whiteness that is the institution. Where any assistance I receive must be acquired by insistence, it ceases to be assistance. As evidenced through my related experience, this conditional residency of barring of access altogether for those who embody diversity is based on institutional imaginings of a key term called fit. Helpfully, Sarah Ahmed's work, especially in her book on Being Included, Racism and Diversity in Institutional Life, relates similarly unsettling experiences of racial profiling that have prompted her to write as an act of reorientation, which I and many of my colleagues and friends of marginalized subjectivities view as a source of solace from these microaggressions that are daily lived experience when you embody a stranger in what should be your home, but somehow never is. Thinking about the stranger, Ahmed's work has helped me revisit institutional conversations of race, racism, and xenophobia toward a nuanced focus on the normalized, the standardized, the institution. As Ahmed asserts, some, more than others, will be at home in institutions that assume certain bodies as their norm. And as people of color, we already embody diversity by providing an institution of whiteness with color. Thus, responsibility for diversity within the institutions is unevenly distributed, and claims to space are in turn asserted by those in power. In Ahmed's discussion of institutional space occupation, she introduces the work of Nirmal Puar, who posits the notion of white bodies as somatic norms. This concept can be demonstrated through the naming of buildings. As you see here, there's Rockefeller Hall, which you can find on lots of campuses, through the naming of buildings, as an act of instituting whiteness, and beyond this, other largely normalized signifiers such as oil paintings, statues, and pictures of white leadership lining the multiple walls of multiple buildings, further demonstrating the institution's history did not include you, or folks who look like you. Philomena Assed's work on cultural cloning helps us better understand reproductions of likeness and whiteness that usually boil down to, again, questions of fit. In other words, does this person make me uncomfortable? Thus, if reproduction of monolingual, English-only whiteness is the norm, then diversity, if not instantly viewed as reasonably suspicious and barred from access, takes on the form of hospitality in a way that marginalized folk are viewed as visitors or guests in the house of English-only monolingualism. That is the institution. And as visitors, we continually receive the message that the house is not ours. It is not our space, and we are welcome, tolerated, maybe even served